Houston's season started with turbulence. Russ was shipped to Washington for John Wall. James Harden was a constant off-the-court distraction until he forced his way out of Houston. The remainder of the season was a mixed bag, as the new acquisitions Wall and Wood were in and out of the rotation due to injuries. Oladipo, who was acquired via the Harden trade, also struggled with injury until he was eventually traded to Miami. The bright spots of the season were the intriguing performances of young prospects Kevin Porter Jr. and Jae'Sean Tate. KPJ showed plenty signs as a capable shot creator on the wing, and Tate displayed his prowess and promise as a defender, often playing bigger than his height of 6'5". The Rockets ended the season with the league's worst record, but after this offseason, you could definitely say that there's abundantly more hope for the future. Speaking of that offseason, it was mainly carried by their draft. I think Houston probably had the best draft in the entire league. They have the number 2 pick and got my favorite prospect in the entire draft, Jalen Green. And then they got a lot of guys who are somewhat raw but have high ceilings in Josh Christopher, Alperen Sengun, Usman Garuba, and Daishin Nix. Or Dashin Nix. I don't know his first name, but... And in terms of signings, it's a technical signing, but they got Daniel Tice through the sign and trade with the Bulls. I think 4 of these guys were first round picks, and Daishin Nix, I think he was a second round pick. I think with this draft, the Rockets didn't have to focus on fit at all. They just had to get the best available, or just players who they thought had the highest ceilings, not having to worry about how players were going to fit with one another, because I think Jalen Green's going to be a superstar, but out of the 4 of Josh Christopher, Alperen Sengun, Usman Garuba, Daishin Nix, probably 2 of these guys are going to underperform, and then maybe 2 of them will overperform. I think there's some big boom or bust potential here, and if they even find a diamond in the rough with one of these guys, you could say that it was worth it. Daniel Tice is a very solid center. I mean, on a good team, he's a backup center. On a trash team, he's a starting center. But he's somebody that can space the floor, somebody that can make the right pass out of the roll or from the high post. Not out of a lot of opportunities, but he's going to make a smart pass when he sees one. And he's pretty versatile. He's a bit better at defending the switch because he's a bit smaller, a bit quicker than most centers. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good pickup for the Rockets there. In terms of subtractions, they didn't lose anybody in the Daniel Tice sign and trade. So there are no subtractions on the trade market, but they did lose Kelly Olynyk. I mean, like, dude was a demon when he arrived in Houston. He was dropping like 20 and 10. Partly you could blame it due to, like, there was just no talent on Houston, with Christian Wood being injured a lot, John Wall being out of the lineup a lot, VO was hurt and then he got traded. KPJ was there, he was getting his, but who else was really scoring? In comes Kelly Olynyk. He was scoring 20 points, relatively efficient too, high 40s from the field, high 30s from 3, and it wasn't just on catch and shoots, he had quite a few post touches as well. So yeah, like their best scorer when Christian Wood out of the lineup left, he got his bag from Detroit. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about Kelly Olynyk on the Houston Rockets because dude was looking like the white Christian Wood. But it didn't really make much sense for them to keep him, you know, so that's whatever. Getting to their current personnel, they got a lot of guys at the guard position. Right now they have John Wall, who doesn't want to be in Houston. He's like 32. He's not going to be he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. I don't think he's going to suit up for the Rockets at all. I don't think he's at training camp. I don't think he's going to play in a single regular season game. I think he's just going to be chilling, working out until he gets traded. How feasible is it for them to trade him? Because his contract, I think it's 2 years left, but it's $44 million per year. Off the top of my head is obviously Philly. There's been some rumors there, just a swap with Ben Simmons and John Wall. Though I think Philly would have to include another big contract to make the contract somewhat match up. If I'm Houston, I definitely do that, but if I'm Philly, sure, I do that, but like, I'm still afraid of the injury risk of John Wall already having Joel Embiid, who himself is an injury risk. Do I want to have 2 of those players on the same team when John Wall hasn't really shown that he can really be much better than Ben Simmons in the regular season? Like, or how much higher does swapping John Wall and Ben Simmons move the needle for Philly, you know? Another team, I can't really think of many teams off the top of my head that would want John Wall. but I really don't know how tradable that contract is and what other teams would want him, so we'll just have to monitor that situation. Obviously, they have Jalen Green, the number 2 pick, should be starting at shooting guard. They have Kevin Porter Jr., who is a shooting guard that can play small forward, but I'm just putting him with the guard rotation. I don't know if it's been clear that they want to start Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. together. They're both score first wings, both 6'5", so it's a bit redundant, but we'll see what they do with that situation. They still have Eric Gordon and his big-ass contract. At the forward position, they have Christian Wood. A big question that remains is, does Houston view Wood as a part of their long-term future? I think he's 26 years old, believe it or not, even though we've only really known about him for the past 3 years. He's been hopping around G League team, the end of the rotation for some contending teams for the first 2 or 3 years of his career, until he had his breakout in Detroit. So that's why it might seem like he's a bit younger than 26, but he's actually 26, and that kind of puts him at the position in his career where he's like a little too old to be a part of a rebuild, so he might hold some value as a trade piece for a team that's contending that might want a stretch big that can put it on the floor and is improving on the defensive end. So we'll see what Houston values there. They have Jayshawn Tate, who showed a lot of potential as a multi-positional defender. He's a 6'5" dude that comfortably played the power forward position last year. On the offensive end, he showed some promise as a slasher, being able to put the ball on the floor from the perimeter. If he were able to improve his outside shot, he'd be a very valuable piece to any team for the remainder of his career. So hopefully he can add that shot to his game and be a bit more consistent from out there. They have Kenyan Martin Jr. still, who was a rookie. I don't know if last year was his second year or his first year, but he showed a lot of potential in the summer league, this most recent summer league. His shot looks a bit better. He still has that same explosiveness that he was heralded for coming into the draft. So he'll have some more shine and some more opportunity this year. And they got Alperen Sengun, the foreign player. I don't really know how much time he'll get, but that remains to be seen. At the center rotation, they have Daniel Tice and Usman Garuba. I talked about Tice. Usman Garuba is a very raw prospect who played for, I think, either Real Madrid or Barcelona. He has a lot of promise as a defender. He's very multi-positional, has good defensive instincts, but on the offensive end, he's very raw, so we'll monitor his development. We'll talk about their coach, Stephen Silas. Last year was his first year with the team. He's a young coach with a young team, so expectations are going to be very low for Houston, as they should be. Honestly, nobody's going to really pay attention to their record. We just want to see how well players develop below him, being coached by him, and how hard the team plays night in and night out. So my thoughts on the roster: Houston's embracing the youth movement. They're in full rebuild mode. They should be looking to disperse a lot of their minutes to their young guys. They had 4 first-round picks in this most recent draft, so they should all at least be getting, like, apart from Jalen Green, who's going to get his like 28 minutes per game at least, like Josh Christopher, Alperen Sengun, Usman Garuba, like those guys I hope would be getting at least 12 minutes per game, because they're all first round picks. They all come into the team with a lot of potential. They're deserving of minutes on a team that doesn't really have that much proven talent. So I think Silas should really disperse the minutes amongst all the young guys to see who can really shine. Another thing to pay attention to will be the management of KPJ and Jalen Green. Can they coexist in the same starting lineup? They're both score-first players with an inside and outside game, but Jalen Green's the number 2 pick. But KPJ proved to have a lot of potential as a lethal scoring wing last year. We saw him hang, I think, 40 points on Drew Holiday. It wasn't mainly Drew Holiday, it was like the Bucks, but Drew Holiday got a lot of blame for that. He still hung 40-plus points on the Bucks, so we saw his potential in that game and throughout the entirety of that season. So it will be interesting to see if they can share the same court, if they can coexist, and if they can, you could have a very lethal dynamic two-headed monster on the wing in KPJ and Jalen Green. Is there enough defense and playmaking between them, though? That remains to be seen. We can talk about the veterans on this team, one being Eric Gordon. He has a horrid contract. Around $60 million is owed to him over the next 3 years. It's potentially the worst contract in the NBA right now. Over the past 3 years, Eric Gordon has consistently been a great shooter, even with his age. But last year, his shooting really fell off a cliff. So it really doesn't look like that contract's going to be worth it anymore. When that contract was signed in 2019 by the Rockets and Daryl Morey, I questioned it because of a drop-off that might have been on the horizon for Eric Gordon. And it appears that that drop-off has arrived. So that contract's bad. They're not getting off of that. John Wall, he's owed $90 million over the next 2 years. I don't really think that contract is tradable, but maybe he can display his trade value if he were to play a couple games for Houston. Maybe, I forget the GM. I think Raphael Stone. Maybe Raphael Stone can convince John Wall to play maybe 5 or 10 games to display that he can put up a relatively efficient 18-7 that a team who is in desperate need of a point guard, primarily a contending team, they might see that and maybe take the risk on John Wall. Maybe they can have a mutual agreement there for both sides to get what they want. As for Christian Wood, I'm lumping him in with the veterans. It seems weird to call him a veteran since he only came on the scene 2 years ago, but he's turning 26 soon. So Christian Wood, though, he has a very tradable and very attractive contract. His contract is below the value that he displays on the court. The Rockets may not view him as on their timeline, though it's not for sure, though. There hasn't really been an indication to what Raphael Stone views Wood's role on this team to be, so we'll just wait and see there. But if he is on the market, he's a very attractive piece to a contender. A big that can stretch the floor very well, create a bit down low, attack hard closeouts from a pick and pop against slow-footed bigs, and he improved somewhat on the defensive end last year. A team in desperate need of some talent at the center position who has title aspirations may want to throw an offer at Houston for Christian Wood. Their defense is going to be trash, and even with the potential that I think their offense will have, their offense isn't going to be incredibly efficient just because this team is young and doesn't have that much ready now talent. So their record is going to be abysmal, just like last year. Maybe they'll get 3 more wins, maybe Christian Wood being a bit more healthy, and they'll finish around 20-62, which will probably put them dead last in the Western Conference. And yeah, obviously they're going to miss the playoffs, but it doesn't really matter because the team's rebuilding. They shouldn't have high expectations going into this season in terms of a win mark to hit. They should really just be focused on the player development of their young team. Last year, Houston finished with the league's worst record, but this season, it's quite likely that'll happen again. But in no way is that a bad thing. This team has nowhere near the amount of talent needed to be remotely close to chasing a play-in spot. They are obviously rebuilding. Steven Silas should be focused on the player development and building the right habits amongst a team full of 23-year-olds and under. Despite the high number that'll be in the loss column, I will be paying attention to how much freedom number 2 pick Jalen Green will be given on the offensive end and how well he performs on defense, particularly his effort level on that end. Another thing to note will be how well KPJ and Green play with each other and if it will be possible for them to start on the wings together. Lastly, to talk about the 2 best players on the Rockets, I don't think there has been an indication as to whether or not Christian Wood is a part of Houston's long-term plans, so it'll be very interesting to see if he is also traded by the Rockets in an effort to add multiple first-rounders. I think it's a foregone conclusion that John Wall will be eventually traded from Houston, though it's a matter of when it will happen. I don't know how much value he holds on the trade market given his massive salary and his questionable health. Focusing back on the positives though, the Rockets have a lot of young prospects on this team, some that can be valuable members of a rotation and some that have the ceilings of 20 to 30 point per game scorers, with their best prospect being Jalen Green. Only time will tell if he can be the new face of the Rockets franchise, but don't worry, they'll have plenty of time to figure that out. I'm sorry, but Houston fans, sit tight. It's gonna be a long rebuild.